she's running!
The girl Reese enters a room with telephones and calls the number on the note. There a voice congratulates her on the royal throne. Then suddenly water starts pouring out of the tubes, and then the girl notices a toilet upstairs, which most likely implies a royal throne. When the water reaches the right level, the girl realizes that she needs a flush handle, and with the help of calculations from the note she finds a 44 phone in which there is a handle, and when it floats to the surface and takes its place, the flush is turned on and the water level hastily decreases. The quest has been successfully completed. The action will take place in our time, when the era of gaming has taken over the youth and even managed to become a cross-cultural sport. But from neighborhoods lit by advertising signs, Reese returns to her dystopian neighborhood. At the computer, she's learning programming languages and discussing her progress with an acquaintance on Discord. But her father Chris calls her to dinner, where they discuss her progress again as if she were a new version of Steve Jobs and her mother, who is no longer with them. A flash of light makes them distracted, and when the lights go out literally all over town and Reese notices that there's not even a grid, this is where the fun part begins. With that power surge, the girl's computer burns out and the family decides to spend time together, and on a tone of sadness, they remember how they used to have fun with their mom and then fall asleep. Reese is awakened by strange flashes from the street, but when she finds nothing, she goes to the workshop. There turns up her grandfather's old book, which explains to us in detail about the radio flash phenomenon, better known as the electromagnetic pulse. Reese finds the equipment and, since she has encountered this kind of quest many times before, she uses the generator to start the equipment. At this time, her grandfather Frank is completely bogged down in electrical appliances, eavesdropping on lines where people only now realize it was an electromagnetic pulse, but he notices on the display that Home is trying to get in touch with him, where Reese is on the line waiting for him. Grandpa immediately asks that he and his father come to him tomorrow, for which they have a map with a dedicated route and a radio that will operate within 5 miles of Frank, so he expects them to contact him on that particular radio in the near future. Grandpa himself lives in the neck of the woods, and since he's out of medicine, he decides to go to the drugstore, which he's not the only one to visit. The man rushes inside and looks for medication, but Frank hints that morphine is on other shelves, so Frank takes his medication, leaving money that will soon become worthless. The next morning, Chris gets in touch with Frank and Grandpa does convince them to go to him, but they need to go as soon as possible because people will start leaving town and moving into the mountains. Meanwhile, while they are getting ready, the townspeople on the street are already aggressively turning against the authorities. And when Reese and Chris did leave their home, they saw what their grandfather had already predicted: chaos and madness among the people. Out of town they met another problem. There was an accident on a bridge that created a huge traffic jam behind it. Frank, meanwhile, had just returned from a hunt and was thanking the earth for its gifts to humans. As they walked toward the accident, Reese saw a familiar grandfather in a pickup truck, and after walking a little further because of a scuffle, the driver of another pickup truck breaks through the barrier and clears the way for everyone. Grandpa was looking forward to his family, but while Reese was asleep, Chris drove around a curve that was 5 miles back, and when the girl started pointing it out, they didn't notice the van and went off the road. She dreamed of memories from her mom's death where she remembered the same grandfather from the bridge, and when she woke up the next morning, she realized again that they had missed the curve. Having taken everything they needed, there were 2 ways: walk along the highway for 20 miles, or walk along the river where the bridge would be, but reduce the distance by 5 miles. And since Chris is fed up with the highway, they take the alternate route, where you can already see that it is getting harder and harder for Chris to walk. But they do come to the bridge, but a little later the father becomes quite ill and he falls unconscious. Chris does not hesitate to run screaming for help and finds a farm where a conscientious citizen turns up and helps the girl find and bring her father home and bandage his wounds. The grandfather, due to the loss of his son and the delay of his wife in Colorado, communicates with the only companion, but Reese goes to get water where again she sees the strange grandfather, who apparently foreshadows her father's death. for inside it turns out that Chris has suddenly stopped breathing. The father eventually, to his great regret, had to be buried, and the farmer Glenn decided to help the girl get to her grandfather. However, Frank himself, because of the realization that his family was too delayed, finds the location of their accident, while Reese continued on her way to the shelter and listened to the stories of the not-silent farmer. Frank continued on their trail, first finding a farmhouse inside which he found a bloodstain and then a grave. Suddenly a man in the road appeared in Reese's path, and Farmer Glenn asked the girl to climb over backwards for her own safety, and he was not wrong. When the car stopped, the intruder took out his grandfather and shot him and then set off, unaware that Reese was sitting behind him. The killer turns off the road and arrives at a car junkyard looking for gasoline, but there he is already waiting. After the shooting, Reese is on the run, but in the outback she is caught by unknown men, one of whom turns out to be an old woman, Ma, who frees the girl and asks her to sit still while she cooks dinner. Frank finds Glenn's body, and in the meantime Ma introduces Reese to her son Bill and her grandson Quinn, who likes to spend time alone. When Reese tells her story and that she needs to get to her grandfather's house as soon as possible, Ma resists her plans, exclaiming that her son saved her life and therefore she must be kind enough to stay with them, for if she leaves, the wild animals will tear her throat out. At night Reese was about to escape, but Ma heard her rustling and sent men in pursuit, who easily captured her and suspended her in a bearskin bag. Bill calls her a caterpillar that will become a little butterfly in the morning. However, nothing of the sort happened in the morning. A bear simply came to her, which Bill shoots, which means Reese was just plain bait. She spent the next 3 days locked up in their barn, and only then did Ma call her in. She supposedly tries to convince our heroine that they're not letting her go for her own safety, but from the conversation it becomes clear that Grandma is only looking for a daughter-in-law for her son or grandson, which means she has a choice to either become part of their family or go back to that barn. The girl is not eager to live with a psychopath and makes her choice, but what is her surprise when she is helped by grandson, who brings her an apple, a radio and a tablet, where she has managed to watch a video of her beloved mother for the last 3% and gain the motivation to finally get out of the damn place. Quinn falls off the roof of the barn to Reese and helps her out of the barn, then escapes from this deranged family with her. The next morning Bill discovers he is missing and goes in pursuit while the guys are eating peacefully, and Reese wants to look at the guy without that dirt on his face. The guy wanted to warn her that he wasn't going any further, but when they heard rustling sounds they rushed off. On the way Reese managed to lose her backpack and they only managed to get away from the killer underwater. That's when he passed them, but he still caught up with them and the guys got into a fight with him, during which Reese saw the strange grandfather again and a bullet flew into the back of Bill, who was trying to kill Quinn. But it wasn't Reese who did it, it was Grandpa Frank. He, by the way, found Reese's backpack and fixed the iPad and phone. And then they did the routine and just survived, while Quinn tried to escape the savages into the world of technology. No, please support the channel with your likes and subscribe. Our goal is 10,000 subscribers. We are trying very hard just to reduce your time in watching movies. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, I won't say goodbye.